Switching up your decor for the seasons can totally transform your space, and today I've got some super simple swaps for spring. Welcome to the Chic Show. Today's playlist is hosted by Rustic and Lace DIY, Divine Designs, and Farmhouse Frugally. Their channels and the playlist are in the description box below. For this project, I'm using this little wood box sign from Dollar Tree. This is one of the smaller ones that does not have the label. I'm going to be painting the top of it with Waverly chalk paint in plaster. I'm painting the sides of the box with DIY paint in Old 57. It's a beautiful bright teal color, and this color is perfect for my craft room, which is where this piece is going to end up. I am going to be decoupaging some rice paper onto the front of this box, so I'm using liquid patina by DIY to apply kind of a starter strip, and then I will spritz my decoupage paper, which is from Sonnet's Maker's Box, and I will place that onto the front of this box. Once I have it placed, I am going to add some liquid patina over the top as well. Once it's completely dry, I'm going to sand away the excess paper along the edges. This paper was designed by Connie at The Painted Photographer.
We lift our hands up and pray, lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us.
Thrifted these little wood rounds, and I'm going to be painting over the front of this one with Waverly chalk paint in plaster. Once that's done, I'm going to be mixing together these two milk paints to make more of a bird's egg blue. I did mix it a bit thick because I was hoping that I would get a lot of cracks and crackles. Although I didn't get all of those crackles that I was hoping for, I did have kind of a textured look and was able to sand that back to give it more of an aged look. I sanded around the edges and then sanded over the top, and some of those thicker places rubbed away so that I could see that plaster paint underneath. Chose to use this bird's nest from IOD's Petiche stamp set. I also used some air dry clay in a little bird mold that I got from Amazon, and I'm going to paint that little bird with that same plaster chalk paint. I drilled a hole in the top of the wood round, and I made a little bow and hanger for it using jute twine and some of this ribbon from Dollar Tree. I tied knots in all the right places so that my twine wouldn't move around. Tite Bond Quick and Thick is the glue that I chose to attach the bird to the nest. This would make a perfect little gift tag or even just a little decoration to hang from your lamp, as I have done here.
We lift our hands up and pray, lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us.
This is a thrifted piece that I found at the Goodwill bins. It's just a scrap piece of trim of some sort, but I gave it a coat of Waverly chalk paint in Snow White. Once that was dry, I also gave it a coat of Pentart's Fine Line Crackle Part 1. So I painted this on the top and then I let it dry completely before I could move on to the next step. In fact, I waited so long that I forgot what I had originally started on this piece, so I didn't really go in the right order. Once this was dry, this is where I should have added the second part of the crackle. But I forgot, as I said, and instead I went ahead and used the paint inlay from Spring Medley, and I'm using this little row of roses that fit perfectly on this piece. And in order to apply a paint inlay, you need to give it a coat of chalk paint, then give it another coat of chalk paint and apply the inlay while the chalk paint is still wet. So here's my wet coat. Then I will spritz the inlay with a little bit of water and apply it to that wet paint. Once I have it placed down there, I spritzed it with more water and then used a wet paper towel just to kind of dab back the excess water, but to also push that paint inlay down into that chalk paint. And then you want to set it aside and let it dry completely. Usually I wait overnight. I just have better luck with it that way. So the next day, once it was completely dry, I spritzed it with more water, gave it another dab with my little towel, and let it sit for about 30 seconds before pulling it up. Not always perfect, but that's what gives it charm. And you can actually reuse these paint inlays about 3 times, and each time you're going to get a little bit of a lighter look. So if you're looking for that vintage, worn, aged look, then this is the project for you. I'm dabbing away the excess water without touching too much on the paint inlay because we do want that to dry completely. It's best to seal it with a spray sealer. But once it was dry, for me, I added that second crackle product. And now I'm going to let that dry completely. Once it's dry, I came back with some brown wax or dark wax, and I'm just going to rub that all over the piece. And this will bring out the crackles. Now, there weren't as many crackles as there would have been had I used it right, but I'm still pleased with the way it turned out.
We lift our hands up and pray. Lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. We lift our hands up and pray. Lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us.
This is the sparrow's nest mold, and for this one I'm going to be using 2 of the birds and the nest. Again, I am trying to use up that dried out air dry clay, but I did place it in 2 of the molds of the birds and 1 of the bird nests. When you use clay, you do want to dust these molds with some cornstarch so that the clay will release. Once the clay releases, you can work around the edges with your fingers to get the look that you want. I painted both birds with fusion paint in French eggshell. The nest will get Waverly Antique wax. Once the paint and the wax was dry, to bring out the details of both the birds and the nest, I used some gold rub and buff. But before using that, I applied some clear wax so that I could have more control over moving that gold rub and buff around. The rub and buff really brings out the details of the birds and the nest, and the clear wax allows me to wipe back in places that normally would be difficult with the rub and buff. This is a thick wood piece that I thrifted, I believe, at the Goodwill bins, and I went ahead and gave it a coat of DIY paint in Farm Fresh. Then I used a couple of gilded transfers. These are not from the spring release, these are older ones that I have from last year, and I applied this label one to the top left, and then I'm going to apply the branch one down at the bottom right. Now that I have the transfers in place, I'm going to position my birds and my nest, and I'm going to use some Tight Bond Quick and Thick to apply these. To add a little more detail, I sanded around the edges of the wood piece, and then I used some more of that gold rub and buff and just rubbed it along the edges. I love the way this one turned out, and I would love to know what you think about it.
We lift our hands up and pray. Lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us. We lift our hands up and pray. Lay all our love before Him with all of our faith. He is the change within us.
If you could, let me know down in the comments which one of these projects today was your very favorite. And don't forget to check out the host channels as well as the playlist in the description box below. Here's another video right here that I think you might like. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the sheet. Bye now.